I hope you all are having a wonderful day. My name is Yupari, and I'd like to invite you into this quick little oil painting demonstration of a cat. So to get started off with, I'm going to be using just a piece of charcoal. So this is just a small little piece of charcoal, and I'm working on just a regular 11 by 14 inch acrylic primed cotton canvas. And if you want to know exactly what materials I'll be using, you can go ahead and scroll down to the description box below. So the first thing I want to think about is the overall design of this picture. So right here we have a simple little shape for where I'm thinking the cat's head is going to fit. And over here we have kind of the general movement of the torso of the little kitty. So we have just these little simple outside shapes to help us figure out where everything is going to fit. So let's suppose the legs are going to be somewhere over here, something like that. This would push the torso out. And by the way, this cat is this is my mother's cat named Confucius. So we have good old Confucius here. He's a 6-month-old, approximately 6-month-old tuxedo cat. I think he's a tuxedo cat, and he is a rescue. A nice little cat. So let's say that the arm is going to fit here. And the reason I'm working with charcoal to begin with is because I'm going to go over simple shapes. So these are simple shapes. I'm going to go over the simple shapes with oil paint, and we're going to be working with flat shapes of color and then building on top of it. But I really want to fill the canvas with the cat. So that's why I'm working very loose and very simple with this little piece of charcoal. And don't worry, when we get into the painting portion, I will list out for you what colors I'll be using. But for now, I just want to show you how with just a few simple straight lines and angles, we can very easily block in the shape for a cat. And this is the same kind of procedure for your portrait drawings or paintings of humans as well. Just looking at the large, simple shapes. That shape comes out a little more. This goes in here. Somewhat like that. Rib cage is probably over here. There's a gentle little shape going out like that. And I'm going to add a little bit of variation into the background. So this will probably be kind of like a value transition from here to here. But I'm not going to put too much in the background. If you notice, the kitty is kind of starting to grow. I'm trying to fit the entire cat onto this canvas. So let's go ahead and even move this up a little bit more. So this is the beauty of working with charcoal. You can easily move things around. This, by the way, is a chamois cloth. Chamois cloth is very useful for subtracting and erasing charcoal. So now what about the paws? Let's use a little circle here, one circle there, one circle there. I usually tell you to use straight lines and angles, but on occasion I'll do something like that just to figure out kind of the placement of something and nothing more than that. So there we have one little paw, and over here we have another little paw. Very simple. And I'm also thinking of the kind of the aesthetic. So the aesthetic that I want to get out of this painting. Do I want it to look exactly like a picture? Do I want it to look kind of expressive and free? I think at the moment I might want to make it somewhere in between very realistic and very expressive. So there we have the paws there. Now there's going to be a little shape here for the leg. So let's work this diagonal shape here. Little shape here for the leg coming out there. A little bit of fur coming out this way. Nice and simple there. Now let's think about the tail. Very furry tail there. It does take up quite a bit of this image. So let's go ahead and make sure we know exactly where we want to fit the tail. Let's let it meet the bottom of the canvas. Very simple, just like that. You can imagine the tail wrapping all the way around using a vertical line here. We're going to take a look at the eyes. Simple little shape there for the eyes. Just a little angle for the axis of the eyes. Drawing a plumb line, vertical line here, just optically. I see that if I continue a vertical line here, I should meet the back of this paw, which is about accurate. Just move it a little bit. That's about accurate. Continue going down, and we reach the tail. See how I'm using vertical lines to help me place things? And we could also do a little envelope too as well, thinking of the outside shape like this. So just looking at the outside shape, there's quite a bit of angle in this direction, like this. And that's pretty much what we have. Perhaps this shape needs to cut in a little more. And we're just about wrapping up this little initial sketch for the cat. The last thing to do really is just to give the cat some little indications of features. No detail needed here, just the overall placement of things. So if the eyes are here, ears are, that one is a little too much like Batman right now. So let's go ahead and just angle it. 1, 2, 3. Very simple little angle there. So at this point now, it's just about placing the features. Little tiny indications of placement. So here's the eyes, nose somewhere about there, and snout, if that's even what it's called for kitties. You know what? I don't know much about kitty anatomy, but I do know about shape and how to observe shape. So that's the tactic we're doing, just looking at simple shape. So if that's going to be the nose, the mouth, the eyes, the last thing to look at for the features really is just the kind of the corner of the side of the neck. Goes out about there, and then of course we have this little, I guess that's the rabies tag or something over here, and then a little flower there. Very simple. All right, now that we have the shape of the kitty all blocked in, we're gonna go ahead and jump into color now, just large masses of color. So let me list out the colors for you. So we have flake white, titanium white, burnt umber, alizarin permanent, cadmium red, medium, yellow ochre, sap green, ultramarine blue, and ivory black. And if you want to know the exact materials that I'm working with, you can go ahead and scroll down to the description box below, and I'll have all of that typed up for you. So large masses of color. What do I mean by a large mass? So a large mass is essentially going to be just a large area of color and value. So the first thing I would want to go with is just black for the dark shapes of the kitten, right? But I don't want anything to be straight black. So I'm going to go ahead and use burnt umber just to reassure that I don't get straight black, and a little bit of yellow ochre. So just burnt umber, yellow ochre. And I'm going to start out not using any medium, and we're going to work very, very thick. So it's all right if we go right over top of the little shapes that we indicated for the eyes. That's quite all right. And remember, that was pretty much just to get an idea of where things are going to be placed. So I'm just filling in this simple shape, painting in very thick. So remember, I'm working on an acrylic primed canvas. I usually tone my canvases with oil paint before filming. But for this instance, I kind of wanted to contrast the value of the dark of the cat with a light background. So I just wanted to contrast the dark values for the cat using a light background. So this ear is going to come up like this. And I don't necessarily want to follow the outlines that I drew out, but I want to kind of build onto them and make them more specific. Very simple little outside shape here for the kitty. Let's see, this goes all the way down here. Then we have the little nose right there. And this is going to be a wet on wet technique, also known as alla-prima painting, meaning you're painting basically wet layers of paint onto wet layers of paint. And when you're using this technique, it's typically a little easier to start off thicker with the oil paint, which is why I'm not using any medium at all. It does take quite a bit of force to push the paint into the canvas, so I should mention that. Push this into here. So that's about the shape of the head, just a simple shape for the kitty. This goes out. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing over here for the leg. There's a nice little swoop here, swooping motion there. Nice little rhythm that I want to get. Same thing over here. Now I see a lot of dark there, so I'm going to just unify it. Unifying just means bringing things together. Squinting my eyes helps me see value. Blurring my eyes helps me see color. So right now I'm squinting because I just want to see large shapes of value. So let's let this come all the way down here. It does take quite a bit of force to push this down. Let's get some more paint. When you're painting alla-prima, you really want to use a lot of paint. A lot of paint. There are certain instances where less is more, but when it comes to the amount of paint that you use when painting alla-prima, like this, more is more. So let's go ahead and just observe. You know what, I'm kind of also looking at this shape here, just this little triangle here. This comes out like that, very simple there. I'm also thinking of this little negative shape here. So right about there. Very simple. And again, it does take quite a bit of force to push the paint in here. All right, so back to the mixture that we had. And so we're going to be building onto this. So the idea with painting wet on wet or alla-prima is that thinner paint tends to stick onto thicker paint. So essentially what that means is we're going to use a little bit of medium or just odorless mineral spirits to build on top of these shapes. All right, so there's a very definitive little gap here between the foot, the kitty's foot, and the tail. So let's just make sure that that little gap is as close as we can make it. Now we have the simple little dark mass for the kitty. Now let's go into the simple little light masses for the kitty. So I'm going to use titanium white, burnt umber, ultramarine blue, titanium white, burnt umber, ultramarine blue. So we're going to have a simple little gray mass. for the light. So that gray mass is going to fit right here for the bottom of the cat's fur. And we're going to just flatten this for now. Just flat shape. Very simple. Same thing over here. Wherever we see the light of the fur of the kitty, so that would be, I guess, the tuxedo part of this cat. So light mass here. I kind of pushed it out a little too far. It's all right. I'm coming back in with paper towel, pushing that in, and don't worry, we're going to go over the background later. But I want to keep the background fairly light. So again, some more light right there, and then there's another light shape here, unifying all this together now. Just unifying the shape. There's even probably a little bit of it here, and that's pushing it. That's definitely pushing it. All right, so after sitting back, I see that I'm missing a little bit of mass here. Just sitting back to observe the overall shape. Now I'm going to go ahead and block in the green for this. So I'm going to use sap green, ultramarine blue, sap green, ultramarine blue, yellow ochre, back to the sap green. And this is going to be for the dark. And you know what? That dark is too dark, and I want to lighten it, but not lighten it too much. So that's when I'll use the flake. So flake white is a nice color to use when you want to lighten something, maintain the body of the oil paint, that is the thickness of the oil paint, but not raise the value that much. So that's when you go into something like flake white. And you could do without flake white if you're afraid of using things that have a little bit of lead content in it. So flake white again is a type of lead white. So there we have the dark mass for the green. Now we're going to use a little bit of yellow ochre, ultramarine blue, titanium white. Now I know in the picture it's kind of overexposed for this light mass. I'm sorry about that. This cat is particularly difficult to take photographs of, and that was the best I could do. So let's go ahead and just block in this light mass. And I know that this green that I'm using is a little darker than the green that you're seeing on your screen, but I just wanted it to be a little bit darker than the photo reference. Leaving a little bit of white in between here, because the next mass that I'm going to block in is going to be the mass for the red. So let's use a little bit of alizarin permanent, a little bit of alizarin permanent, a little tiny touch of ultramarine blue, just alizarin permanent, ultramarine blue, and a little bit, just a smidgen there, of cadmium red. So let's go ahead and fill this in now. Simple little dark shape of red. So there's one there. It's a darker shape of red here. And then there are lighter shapes of red in those areas. So I'm going to use just cadmium red, yellow ochre. Quite a bit of paint is going into this. So cadmium red, yellow ochre. And there we have that shape. Very simple. Let's fit that shape into here. I'm very cautious of the green touching the red. Don't want the green touching the red at this point. Now I'm going to go back to the brush with the light gray. Just kind of blend these little shapes in together. Just making sure that I'm covering the white in this area now. So back to the green. So let's use the green to close off this gap now. Very careful there with the paint application. Pushing into there. We got some red in there, but that's okay. It's all going to be okay. Now I'm going to eliminate the glare with the fan brush. Just trying to eliminate the glare. Back to the green. This actually comes all the way up there. Just letting that meet that area. Now what I'm going to do is start to put in a tone for the background. And this is where I'll use a little bit of odorless mineral spirits, just a tiny bit. Using this gray here, I'm going to go to the titanium white. And just very thin now. I mean, not super thin, but pretty thin. I'm going to go over with this very light color. Now, if you can look at it and compare it to the background, it's pretty close to the white of the background, but I don't want it to be too light. So that's the key here. Just not making it too light. And this is also going to help me establish these little edges. So back into, let's say, this middle gray, titanium white, ivory black, titanium white. Now we have this value, just filling this in. Let's see, let's cut this into here. I know that there's a little less space here between the ear and that shape. Oh, but that's okay. That's quite all right. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in the rest of this shape now with this mixture. Now that I've covered the rest of this shape here with this flat color, I'm going to go ahead and make an aesthetic choice of putting something a little bit darker, a darker platform here. So let's go ahead and switch to the ivory black, alizarin permanent. So I want it to be a little bit warm-ish. I'm going to thin the paint out with a tiny bit of odorless mineral spirits. And now we're going to go ahead and put in this shape for the background. So the reason I'm working thinner in the background is not only to just cover the shapes a little more quickly, but I'm also painting the background a little more thin just because of the aesthetic. So I want to leave a lot of these brush strokes to show in the background to make it kind of a painterly type touch, painterly effect. See that? We're even going to let some of the brush strokes there show, covering the light very simply now. Let's go ahead and just blend these shapes in here. This is purely for aesthetic, that I'm lightening and softening the shape, purely for the aesthetic of the painting. Now we're going to get into some of the smaller shapes for the cat's head. So I'm going to use a little bit of yellow ochre, alizarin permanent, tad bit of cadmium red to put in this little shape that we have here for the ears. Just a tiny little glimpse there. Not terribly complicated. Now over here we're going to do the same thing. Barely see anything there. So let's just paint it like we can barely see it. Now I'm going to use a little bit of ivory black and alizarin permanent. Just ivory black, alizarin permanent. And we're going to put in these darker shapes now. Notice that the alizarin permanent makes the ivory black look much darker. So let's look at the structure for the little kitty here. So let's pay attention to the value delineations. Observing the value should give us an understanding of the structure. especially of the fur. So these areas over here are much darker because the light source is coming from this direction. So the light's here and the dark is there. That shape there will be darker as well as a consequence of the direction of the light. And this is going to be darker right around here, kind of the whole thing really. Thinking of just this large, imagine it like a dark cotton ball. Just a dark cotton ball with fur and ears. Darker over there. And it's even a little darker over here actually. Still trying to leave these areas light, but we're gonna have to put some little indications of fur. So let's go ahead and do that now. Just pushing out with the brush, letting the paint meet the color of the background a little bit. Even down here, goes a little further. Now I'm letting the paint mix with the dark of the paint mix with the surrounding colors, and automatically we're going to get a type of value transition. That is, the background is making this dark color lighter, so it's kind of speeding up the process a little bit. Now the same kind of thing out here. There are going to be some shapes of fur in this direction, so I'm kind of turning the brush here to try to get that direction of the brush mark. Now of course that creates a glare, so I'm going to go with the fan brush and try to minimize the glare. Now the next thing I'm going to do is take a different brush with a little bit of yellow ochre and burnt umber, just yellow ochre, burnt umber, and we're going to put in a little shape. Where is it? Right about here maybe? Not really sure if that's where it's going to fit, but I'm putting it there. That's going to be the light of the kitty's eye to the left of your screen. Same deal, following this little axis. The light for the kitty's eye on the other side. Now the thing is, I don't know if I'm placing this in the right place, and I probably am not, but I'm going to fill this in a little bit lighter and a little bit larger than need be, so that I can come back in and make corrections. And I'll show you just what I mean in a second. Filling this in here. Now of course, this is too close. The eyes are too close. So with the brush with the dark, just gonna push that over till we get it in the right place. Same deal over here. Comes out like that. And I think that's a little closer. I'm going to use a vertical line here to compare the corner of the eye to the top of the ear. So a little bit closer. Now the only thing that could be off now is the angle. So push this down. That's why I said that I was working a little bit larger with that shape. See how I can easily push that down? Now the point here is just to be able to place a shape. Just a simple large shape for the eyes. Super simple. Now, still it needs to move down a little more, so I have to think of this angle now. And I'm not trying to create a perfect photographic rendition of the cat. In fact, I'm never really trying to create a photographic looking image. I'd rather it be like a painting. Who knows what that means? So let's push this down. And of course what I mean is I'm considering the aesthetic of the painting. I don't want it to be too photographic. I want there to be some elements of brush strokes, some elements of color variation that you wouldn't perhaps see in a photograph. Now I think that's about where I want it to be, so I'm going to take a smaller brush with a little bit of ivory black and ultramarine blue and a tiny bit of mineral spirits. And let's go ahead and put in this dark shape here. Hopefully it'll fit. So a little more odorless mineral spirits. And there we have it. It's sticking pretty nicely. And over here, simple little dark shape there for the kitty's eyes. Now I'm going to use a different brush. Actually, I'm just going to use the brush that I used for the light there. And a little bit of ultramarine blue, titanium white, just ultramarine blue, titanium white. We're going to have this shape of light here. Simple little shape of light. For the light resting on the cat's eye, there's going to be a little tiny light, little glimpse of light over here. Let's put that in there. And the same goes over here, a tiny little glimpse of light. Tiny, very tiny. Now then, I'm going to take the same brush. I'm not going to clean it off. I'm just going to use it to kind of mix with this color that I have already established. And we're going to have a little bit of a light mass here. So this is going to be a plane change. And a plane change is a three-dimensional construct of a flat object in space. So this is a little plane change. A little bit more light here, actually. A little bit of light. Somewhat like that. And there's going to be a little light for the nose. This will help me place it as well. So let's go ahead. Place that in there for where the nose might be. Again, not entirely sure of the location of the nose yet. Just working with these simple shapes. Now with the same brush I used for that, I'm going to go ahead and push this down. Pushing it down, very simple there. And we're going to have the same kind of thing over here. Pushing it down. Just trying to get that shape. This is how we're building from large shapes to smaller shapes. Very simple. And there's going to be another dark shape, so I'm going to use a little bit of Alizarin permanent odorless mineral spirits, just a tiny bit of it right there. Now I'm going to switch brushes to the light brush. I'm going to use a little bit of titanium white and ultramarine blue and a touch of ivory black. Let's go ahead and put in this light shape here. Very distinct little light shape. And of course, there's a little glimpse of light here. Little glimpse of light fur. And now we're starting to see somewhat the image of the kitty emerging from just simple shapes of color and value. So let's go ahead. Let's have some fun with it. Let's put in the little whiskers. Very fun. Let's push this over. Whoop. 1, 2, 3. Do the same thing. 4. I mean, his whiskers kind of turn a little bit, but that's all right. Let's put some of these whiskers. You know what? I never knew he had these whiskers until I started the painting. Interesting looking cat. 1, 2, 3. What an interesting looking cat. 1, 2, and there we have it. You know what? He has one over here. A little dark shape there. And of course, I messed up, so let's do that over. And I'm actually noticing that this shape for this eye is still kind of big. I'm glad I messed up there, so I saw that that was too big. Again, there we go. Just a little touch there for that. Now, I see that there's a little more light here, so I'm going to use the same brush, add a little bit of yellow ochre to it, cadmium red, and here we have a little more light right there. Very simple now. Now, I'm going to clean off that brush just using odorless mineral spirits, back to the titanium white and ultramarine blue mixture. And we're going to put in these little light masses here. Simple little shapes for the fur. Now each time I'm going to make a brush stroke for the fur going in this direction, I'm going to have to wipe off some paint. I'm going to wipe off the paint, and that's because I'm trying to overlap it with the red. So I'm just going to wipe off the brush, do it again. Wipe off the brush, do it again. Oh, didn't get it that time. I don't think we need to do that with this. Just fill that in. Nope, we do. Okay. There we go. And repeat till we have some fur. Now with the same brush, I'm going to let it kind of mix with the dark here. And I'm going to add a little bit of odorless mineral spirits just to thin it out now. Probably added too much. I'm going to clean off the brush. Just using paper towel for that. There we go. Now we're making a simple little transition from this dark fur to this. And of course I kind of exaggerated those shapes a little bit too much. So let's go back in with the red. And that's a little closer. Now I'm going to add a little bit of, I see I'm running out of brushes. I'm going to use that same brush, combination of ultramarine blue and alizarin permanent with the ivory black, creating a nice velvety kind of purple. And see if it's the right value. And it's kind of working. So this value is going to work for basically putting in the darker planes within this large mass of fur. And the reason I'm going in the violet kind of velvety purple is just because I just want to add a little bit of color variation in here that isn't really in the photo reference. Also just kind of for the aesthetic, really. Why not purple? Let's push this out this way. Trying to get the effect of fur. Super simple. Super simple. Just minimize the glare there. Moving on down, I'm going to use a combination of yellow ochre, alizarin permanent, tiny bit of cadmium red, and I'm going to use a tiny bit of odorless mineral spirits just to thin it out. And we're going to put in this little tag here. And there we have this simple little shape there for the tag. And what's going on here? I think this needs to move up. Just moving that up a little bit. All right, so I'm going to flatten this out a little bit. Just want to make sure I have enough room here for that little bell that he wears. Flatten this out now. Now I'm going to use the fan brush to eliminate some of the glare that I see here. I'm going to use the brush with the dark color that I used for the cat's eyes, a little bit of odorless mineral spirits. I'm going to establish this edge. There we go. Very simple there. I'm going to switch back to the brush with the dark red color. I'm going to go ahead and move this down. The paint is super flexible at this point. fan brush to eliminate some of that glare. And now I'm kind of running out of brushes, so I'm going to use the same brush that I made that one brush stroke with. Add a little bit of flake white and tiny bit of yellow ochre and a little bit of odorless mineral spirits. And I'm using flake white just because it has a very heavy body, and I'm using quite a bit of it, so I can paint rather thick. Now this is going to be an instance where I want a very specific brush stroke, so I'm going to hold one hand with the other and try to get this light here. And there we go. That's the little light on the, I think that's the rabies tag. I'm not entirely sure. So a little bit of burnt umber ultramarine blue, and here's this little dark shape for that little tag. Now, switching brushes here, I'm going to use a little bit of that violet type color that I mixed for this region here. And I'm going to go ahead and just put this little mass into place for that little bell shape. Now what's most important is to notice the value. That value is a little bit lighter. The color is a little bit cooler, so I'm using titanium white and titanium white ultramarine blue. So titanium white ultramarine blue. Now I'm going to use a combination of ultramarine blue and sap green with the same brush. I'm going to go ahead and put in that little shape there for the bell. Not sure I want to put too much detail into that. We'll see. So I'm going to go back to the ivory black, ultramarine blue, a little bit of odorless mineral spirits. And now we're going to put in the boundary, the back side of that bell. Dark little shape there. And I'm going to add a little bit of alizarin permanent to that mixture. And we're going to establish the little outside shape of that. Very simple there. Now with the same brush, I'm going to use titanium white, ultramarine blue, just those two. We're going to paint in this little light shape here. There's even a tiny bit of light here. And I know I'm making it much lighter than it is in the photo reference, and so that's part of the aesthetic. Now the next thing to do, I'm going to take the same brush, clean it off a little bit, use odorless mineral spirits, ivory black, ultramarine blue, and now we're going to have this dark boundary here. This is the accent mark. So this is where one form meets another form, and that is the form of the red for the kitty's shirt is meeting the green. Now, moving on down, we're going to go ahead and reestablish this little corner. So this needs to come up a little bit higher. So there's going to be a definitive angle here. And this is going to come out even further. Just giving him a little more accurate of a shape there for this shirt. Just going to put that dark shape down here. Alright, so now the same kind of thing is going to happen here. I'm going to have a few little brush strokes that come out just to give the effect of the fur. I'm going to use the fan brush to, of course, eliminate that glare. Alright, so I'm going to use the same kind of color for the green here. So I use just ultramarine blue, sap green, yellow ochre, tiny bit of ivory black. So let's go ahead and just reestablish this edge. We're going to let some of the brush strokes there show. Just going to leave some brush marks just for the sake of aesthetic. I'm going to make it a little bit darker by adding more ultramarine blue. And just more ultramarine blue. There we have that very definitive shape. Single brush stroke time. All right. Now I'm going to use a little bit of titanium white, sap green, ultramarine blue, and a touch of yellow ochre, and we're going to paint in this little light shape here. Hopefully single brush stroke time again. And now I'm just going to eliminate the glare. It's a simple little touch there to eliminate the glare. Now we're going to move on down to these shapes here. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of titanium white into this little mixture here. Add a little bit of yellow ochre. Oh, sorry, that was ultramarine blue. So titanium white, ultramarine blue, mixed right onto this little region. So without any mineral spirits, let's see if we can apply this little light shape here. And it looks like it's working. So let's go ahead and now just observe the shape. This comes out like that a little bit. So there we have some of the light on the fur. There's even a little more light over here. Just a little bit of light reaching his paws. And right here there's an area that's receiving quite a bit of light, but it's not quite this bright. So I'm going to use ultramarine blue, mix into this little region here, and let's let the brush strokes show the fur. See that? Simple little squiggle of the brush, and we have fur. All right, now I'm going to switch to the dark brush. So I'm going to use Ivory black, Alizarin permanent, ultramarine blue, and now we're going to go ahead and make this a little bit darker over here. So notice how, remember when we covered this dark shape initially, we used a little bit of yellow ochre to lighten the value. So now we're not going to use yellow ochre, so now we're going to construct the plane changes here with this darker value. And I'm going to squint down just to see the value. So there we have that shape there. Comes out a little bit, and this goes up here. There we have one paw. And let's actually let some of these brush strokes show. Now remember, that's going to be glaring a lot, so fan brush, just to eliminate the glare. Now there's going to be quite a bit of dark here because this is the conjunction of the kind of the hip with the tail. So there's going to be quite a bit of dark there. We want our edges here to be rather soft. Now over here, this is going to be a little bit of a kind of an upside down W looking shape for the paw. Somewhat like that. Now moving on up, let's go ahead and establish this little shape again. It comes out like that. This whole area is pretty dark. So let's just unify all of that dark, leaving these light areas to show, to give us the form that we want for the fur. Back to Ivory black, Alizarin permanent, ultramarine blue. Now we have the dark here for the tail. Let's go ahead and just kind of exaggerate the fur a little bit. kind of creating that little soft edge there. So it's going to be pretty dark over here, but light over there. Let's let some of these brush strokes show. Simple little brush strokes to help show the fur. And of course, we have to eliminate the glare. And remember, glare is just the paint reflecting the light. That's all. All right, now I'm going to switch back to the brush that I made these light shapes with. And there's quite a bit of light here, but not going to use that much light because if I squint down, this area is not as light as this area. So let's just take this brush, find an area suitable for mixing on the palette right now. There, so let's just mix onto here. So ultramarine blue, mixing right onto this area. Very simple there. And I know that the paint is, this value is still too light, but it's going to mix with the paint that's on here. So let's go ahead and see if I apply the brush stroke in this direction, we might be able to see it a little better. See if that value is acceptable. It's light, but it's not as light as that. And that's pretty much all there is to that. So let's go ahead and use that value here. Single brush stroke. Hopefully that was in the right place. Fan brush. I think it's all right. Now I'm actually going to apply the brush strokes in this direction. I know it's creating quite a bit of glare, but I'm trying to get the brush strokes to show the kind of the effect of the fur out in this direction. Very simple. Now let's go ahead and eliminate that glare that we created. And hopefully the brush strokes will show and make it look like the fur on the tail. I'm getting there, Just need a little more, whoops, a little more in this direction. And maybe some more over here. All right, so let's see if that works. Fan brush. The fan brush also does help to soften some of these edges, which is kind of important for fur. Still need some more over here, so let's go ahead and try to apply the brush marks. Just dropped my brush, but that's all right. Let's move this down. Fan brush. That's a little better. Now I'm going to go ahead and make another aesthetic decision. So let's take that. So let's take some of this dark, some of this green, a little bit of Alizarin permanent, some odorless mineral spirits, tiny bit. That's too dark. Let's use some flake white. And I just want to add another little value transition here. Another simple little value transition. Carving out that shape there. Simple little value transition here for the background. This is purely for the sake of aesthetic. There we go, simple little shapes. Filling all into here. Now with a little titanium white, sap green, ultramarine blue, and yellow ochre, we're going to put in this little light right about here. It's a little light shape on the cat's eye. Might have to use a little more mineral spirits. So just using mineral spirits today to thin out the paint. Remember, thinner paint tends to stick onto thicker paint. And there we have that little glow. And let's add a little bit of sap green Let's make this a little more greenish. Just a little more green right here. So we can get that very distinct cat eye. Now I'm going to add a little bit of ultramarine blue and ivory black and a tiny bit of alizarin permanent. And we're going to get this little stripe here. Probably a little more mineral spirits just to get the paint to stick. Here we go. Right about there. Now we're going to use a little bit of ultramarine blue, titanium white, and a tiny bit of alizarin permanent. I'm going to paint in this little small detail. Tiniest little glimpse of light there. Now we're going to use, we're going to switch back to the ivory black, alizarin permanent, ultramarine blue mixture. Right there. We're going to use the same thing right here. Trying to get the very distinct shape that the cat has for that eye. Now very lightly, I'm going to try to eliminate some glare. Very simple there. And now, with the same dark color, I'm going to go ahead and reassess this shape here. Just tiny little adjustments now. Alright, now I'm going to use a little bit of titanium white, ultramarine blue, ivory black, and a tiny bit of alizarin permanent. We have a little speck of light here. Tiny little speck of light there. And even up here. A little more mineral spirits, and there's actually some hairs that I didn't see earlier right here on the cat's ears. I guess he has hair in his ears. Go figure. Just tiny little touches there. Now I'm going to use the same dark color from before, ivory black, ultramarine blue, alizarin permanent, and that little stripe of dark here needs to be a little darker. And we're going to do the same thing right over here. Same little dark shape. There's a tiny little dark shape there. We're going to use a little bit of titanium white and ivory black for this light here. Tiny little glimpse of light right there on the corner. I'm going to use the fan brush just to eliminate some of the glare. And with that, we have the conclusion of this oil painting demonstration of a cat. So I wish you the best in all of your artwork, and I'll see you on the next one.